They had the knowledge, laboratories, and some of the brightest minds in Europe. Yet by 1945, the image of a completed Nazi atomic bomb is not what historians find in the archives. What happened to the German atomic scientists after the war, and where did their notebooks, experiments, and secret plans end up? A laboratory in 1942, a ledger with cramped calculations, a crate sealed with a brass screw, a scientist led away by Allied officers. That trail, part recovery, part mystery, leads to interrogation rooms, shipping manifests, secret programs, and moral compromises that reshaped the post-war world. Before the war, Germany was a center of modern physics. The discovery of nuclear fission in 1938 by Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, interpreted by Lise Meitner and Otto Frisch, transformed atomic theory from abstract curiosity to practical possibility. German universities and research institutes produced Nobel laureates and gifted theoreticians. But the path from elegant theory to a deliverable weapon is long, expensive, and bureaucratically treacherous. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, German scientists understood the physics of fission. Whether they were poised to build a bomb is a separate question. The technical obstacles were formidable. To create a nuclear explosive, one needed either a sufficient quantity of fissile material, highly enriched uranium-235 or plutonium-239, and a reliable way to assemble it quickly. Enriching uranium requires massive industrial capacity and precise isotope separation. Producing plutonium requires a functioning nuclear reactor plus chemical processing to extract the element. Germany faced shortages of raw uranium, limited access to heavy water, a moderator used in some reactor designs, and difficulty in concentrating the isotopes at scale. Allied bombing, constrained industrial capacity, and competing demands for resources, rockets, conventional armaments, further limited what could be attempted. Organization compounded the technical hurdles. Unlike the centralized Manhattan Project, German nuclear research was dispersed across universities, military research offices, industrial firms, and informal groups. Rivalries among scientists, shifting patronage within the Reich, and the Nazi leadership's prioritization of other weapons and projects created a fragmented program. Some scientists worked under military oversight. Others pursued theoretical studies with limited material support. The consequence was a program rich in ideas, but poor in industrial coordination. Inside that fractured world were notable figures. Werner Heisenberg, whose theoretical acumen made him a central figure in German nuclear discussions. Otto Hahn, credited with the chemical discovery of fission. Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, Kurt Diebner, Walter Botha, and others who led experiments and interpreted results. Their motives and choices varied: professional ambition, patriotic service, moral hesitation, and their wartime roles have prompted intense historical debate. Some historians argue individual scientists slowed or misdirected research to avoid presenting a clear path to a weapon. Others contend constraints were material and organizational rather than ethical. Where interpretation leans on intent rather than documented action, we must mark it indefinido. By 1944-45, the Allies were determined to learn what Germany had achieved. Allied intelligence mounted targeted operations to seize scientific assets. The ALSOS mission, organized by Allied military intelligence with scientific advisors including Samuel Goudsmit, moved into liberated and conquered territory with the specific goal of locating German nuclear facilities, personnel, and materials. Teams of soldiers, scientists, and interrogators swept labs, factories, and universities. They cataloged equipment, confiscated documents, and escorted key personnel to Allied custody for questioning. What ALSOS and parallel efforts recovered was a mixed haul. Some laboratories were dismantled and equipment shipped to Allied centers for analysis. Tons of captured uranium ore and samples from German firms and occupied mines were documented and transported for study. Technical reports, laboratory notebooks, and correspondence were found in various locales, some in central research facilities, others hidden in crates or stored in industrial archives. Portions of this material were examined by Allied scientists to assess how close the Germans might have been to a weapon and which technologies would be most useful for Allied programs. At the same time, a small but crucial episode unfolded on British soil. In July 1945, a group of 10 German scientists were detained and brought to a country house near Cambridge, codenamed Farm Hall, under Operation Epsilon. The detainees were housed, recorded, and interrogated. Their conversations were secretly recorded to assess their knowledge and capabilities. The so-called Farm Hall transcripts later became a major primary source for historians. When news of the American atomic bombing of Hiroshima reached their house, the scientists' reactions, ranging from shock to technical reappraisal, provided a stark window into what they had and had not achieved. Their astonishment strongly suggested they had not completed a working implosion bomb, and many of their subsequent technical conversations revealed gaps between speculation and operational reality. The human outcomes for Germany's scientific cadre after 1945 spread in several directions, often depending on who captured them and the immediate needs of victorious powers. One common path was Allied internment and interrogation. Many scientists were detained for weeks or months while intelligence services sorted through documents and tried to assess culpability and knowledge. Some were cleared as primarily academic or peripheral to any weapon program. Others were more deeply scrutinized for political affiliations or direct involvement in military development. Another trajectory was recruitment. As the Cold War shadowed the immediate aftermath, both the United States and the Soviet Union saw value in German expertise. The U.S. launched Operation Paperclip to bring German scientists, most famously rocket engineer Wernher von Braun and his team, into American programs. It is important to be precise. Many paperclip recruits were rocketry and aeronautics specialists rather than nuclear physicists, and the U.S. prioritization of talents reflected strategic calculations beyond a simple moral ledger. For those German scientists with relevant knowledge, Allied offers could mean academic positions, contracts in national laboratories, or integration into military-industrial projects. These moves were not without controversy at home. The decision to employ former members of the Nazi-era scientific establishment raised difficult ethical questions that many historians and commentators considered then and since. The Soviet Union also conducted organized efforts to acquire German scientific capacity. Soviet teams secured facilities, equipment, and personnel in occupied zones and transferred many resources eastward. In documented cases, specific German scientists and their laboratories were relocated to the Soviet Union to aid in its nascent atomic and technological programs. One well-known example is Nikolaus Riehl, who headed uranium research at an industrial plant and was moved to the Soviet Union after the war to work on atomic projects. Such transfers were often compulsory and carried significant ethical and personal consequences for the individuals involved. Not all scientists were recruited or captured. Some faced legal accountability. Denazification tribunals and other legal processes examined the political activities and war-related collaboration of academics and technical personnel. A minority were prosecuted for crimes connected to wartime activities, particularly where complicity in atrocities or forced labor could be documented. Many more underwent administrative restrictions, barred from certain posts or stripped of privileges, before gradually reintegrating into civilian scientific life. Some scientists returned to academia and took on prominent roles in rebuilding West German science, while others emigrated to neutral countries or, in a limited number of cases, to South America. Details of such emigrations are often indefinido when records are sparse or contested. The question at the heart of the title, the fate of the secret plans, is both concrete and vexed. Allied teams did seize physical documents, lab notes, draft reports, and equipment. Farm Hall transcripts provided additional documentary evidence of intent, methods discussed, and technical misunderstandings. Copies of seized materials were studied in Allied laboratories, and some were retained in national archives. But two important caveats must be stated. First, the presence of notes or experimental records does not equate to a finished weapon design. Many documents were exploratory, containing calculations, conceptual sketches, and reports of failed or incomplete experiments. Historians widely agree that Germany, by the spring of 1945, had not assembled a deliverable nuclear device. The mainstream consensus, based on the available evidence, captured documents, interrogations, Farm Hall recordings, and material audits, is that Germany lacked the industrial-scale enrichment and reactor infrastructure necessary to produce a bomb in wartime conditions. Second, there are contested and indefinito elements. Some wartime reports and post-war claims pointed to hidden files, missing crates, or documents spirited away in the chaotic final months of the Reich. Certain individual cases of disappearance or unverified smuggling of scientific papers have persisted in secondary literature and fringe accounts. Where archival provenance is unclear, these claims must be treated as disputed. Some historians suggest small packets of materials may have been overlooked or transported privately. Others insist surviving inventories and Allied logs account for most scientifically relevant documents. The truth likely lies in a mix. Documented seizures removed the lion's share of institutional files, but isolated notebooks or private papers could have been lost, destroyed, or hidden and remain indefinito. What of the concrete locations of seized materials? Allied records indicate that captured equipment and documents were examined in laboratories in Britain and the United States and placed under military custody while assessments were made. Some materials were incorporated into Allied scientific studies. Others entered the archives of national institutions. Specific provenance statements, this notebook now held in Archive X, confiscated at Site Y, are reliable only when supported by documented archival records. In many cases, those records exist. In others, chain of custody details are fragmentary. When a claim lacks clear provenance, historians mark it indefinito and weigh competing accounts. Returning to the scientists themselves, personal fates reveal the moral ambiguities of post-war reconstruction. Werner Heisenberg, for example, was interrogated and questioned, but ultimately returned to scientific leadership in post-war Germany, becoming a prominent figure in rebuilding German physics. Otto Hahn, who had discovered fission before the war, endured the turmoil of the period and later took strong public positions in favor of nuclear disarmament. Some scientists accepted positions abroad. Others resumed careers in industry or academia within Germany. For a number of them, the war years and the occupation left reputational scars and complicated legacies. Significant scientific contributions paired with ethical questions about collaboration and complicity. The decisions of Allied authorities to retain or employ former German experts were shaped by strategic urgency and the emerging rivalry with the Soviet Union. Recruiting talent promised technical advantage in an uncertain geopolitical landscape. But these decisions also posed hard moral dilemmas. To what extent should a victorious power utilize the expertise of individuals connected to a criminal regime? The answer taken by governments varied, often balancing immediate security needs over post hoc moral accountability. The result was a post-war scientific order in which knowledge circulates across former battle lines, and in which the migration of expertise accelerated the technologies that would define the Cold War, including nuclear arsenals. There is one final paradox. The real secrecy of scientific plans is rarely permanent. Knowledge migrates. Notebooks tucked away in a lab can be captured, copied, analyzed, and disseminated. Ideas discussed in clandestine meetings can be reconstructed elsewhere. In that sense, the danger posed by wartime science did not vanish with the fall of Nazi Germany. It was transformed. Some former German scientists contributed to peaceful reconstruction and to medical and industrial advances. Others were absorbed into military programs that fed new arms races. The mobility of expertise meant that lines of moral responsibility blurred, and the reuse of knowledge raised uncomfortable questions about complicity, justice, and the limits of pragmatic reconciliation. So, where did the Nazi atomic scientists go? Many were detained and interrogated. Some were interned and later released. Several were recruited by the United States or the Soviet Union. A number resumed academic careers in Germany or abroad, and a few vanished into uncertain records. What happened to their secret plans? Allied teams seized significant documents and materials, and key evidence suggests Germany had not produced a finished weapon. Yet pockets of uncertainty persist. Missing papers, unverified claims, and contested narratives that historians continue to probe. When evidence is robust, scholars assert it. When it is not, we label it indefinito and present competing interpretations. The story does not end with the removal of crates or the signing of contracts. The aftermath of those seizures and recruitments shaped decades of scientific development and ethical debate. The Allied choice to harness German expertise expedited technological gains, but at moral cost. The Soviet appropriation of personnel and equipment fueled parallel programs behind the Iron Curtain. For the scientists themselves, the war's end brought disparate outcomes: rehabilitation, renown, exile, or obscurity, each carrying a complex moral ledger. In the end, the answer is neither neat nor sensational. The Nazi atomic program was constrained by technical, material, and organizational limits. Allied operations recovered critical documents and materials. Key figures were interrogated, recruited, or reintegrated, and some records remained disputed or indefinito. The larger lesson is about the afterlife of knowledge. How scientific expertise migrates, how states prioritize expediency over moral clarity, and how the remnants of a defeated regime concede the technologies of a new era. If this journey through laboratories, interrogations, and secret transfers piques your interest, subscribe for more deep dives into the tangled intersections of science, war, and ethics. For now, consider this. When plans are taken, copied, or repurposed, secrecy may end, but responsibility and consequence endure. Who bears that responsibility, and how should societies reckon with the scientific past? Those questions remain with us.